Giannis Antetokounmpo has finally done it. Coming into a game against the Detroit Pistons, Giannis was making 45% of his mid-range jumpers as he's finally developed somewhat of a consistent jumper, and in the game, this new skill allowed him to pour on 59 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 blocks, shooting 61% from the floor. With an added offensive load because of the absence of Damian Lillard, Khris, Middleton, and Portis, Giannis was able to put the team on his back. In the game, he shot 8 of 13 from outside the paint, those being the jump shots, as this has been a huge reason as to why Giannis is currently leading the NBA in scoring. This recent jump in shooting effectiveness isn't a fluke either, as Bucks assistant head coach Vin Baker, who when he was in the league had a great mid-range jumper of his own, has been working with Giannis to pass down this knowledge. In the years past, Giannis was always thinking too much about his shot, and he also wasn't hitting them. But look how he gets into the jumper now, as here it's just one rhythm dribble, straight into a free throw line jumper, which he knocks down. Why is it so important that Giannis can mix it up? Well, that's because when his teammates aren't spacing the floor, he's still able to score. In the past, we've seen teams build a wall against Giannis and dare his teammates to make outside shots. And the most notable moment of this happening was in the 2019 Eastern Conference Finals, as after taking the first 2 games of the series, Toronto put up the wall and dared the outside shooters of Milwaukee to hit shots, and they didn't, winning the next 4 games of the series. So if Giannis is able to space the floor for himself, he doesn't have to rely on other guys to help him score. But what's perhaps even better is how this recent mid-range shooting efficiency has been transferring to his free throws, as in the game Giannis made 16 out of a possible 17, which is amazing. We've been saying this for years now, as if Giannis could just develop somewhat of a consistent jumper, that would make him an unstoppable force, and that's because he can make plays like these. First, to start the game, Giannis was able to get the Pistons bigs into foul trouble, which then set him up for a night of dominance, here spinning through 2 Pistons for the dunk. Even when Damian Lillard returns, this is something I want to see the Bucks continue to do, and it's all up to Dame. As often to start the game, Dame is always taking tough shots, but instead of doing that, I think he needs to feed Giannis the ball so he's able to soften up the defense with fouls, which will then allow Dame to have better luck scoring himself. But back to how Giannis dominated the Pistons, now with Stewart on him, that's a better matchup, as Giannis makes a turnaround hook shot in the lane. With the Pistons now setting up the wall, Giannis finds the angle needed to finish on the reverse lay. Now with Paul Reed on him because Duran's in foul trouble, Giannis goes to work, throwing one down, and then with Reed actually holding his ground, it doesn't matter, as Giannis makes good on a fadeaway baseline jumper. Duran would then check back into the game, only to then commit his 3rd foul, and this play here is a direct result of not having Duran on the floor, as Giannis goes right to the rack and smashes another. Without Duran, the Pistons could not contain Giannis, as here Stewart is just too small as he gets beaten on the offensive glass. Now against his former teammate in Malik Beasley, Giannis strips him on one end, which then leads to a fast break hammer on the other. Under Coach Bud, I thought Milwaukee didn't utilize Giannis as a primary defender nearly enough, as they gave that role to Drew Holiday, which seems fair enough, but if you think back to the Miami Heat series where they were eliminated in the first round back in 2023, that was a time where Giannis should have guarded Butler. And because of Mike Budenholzer's old scheme and Drew wanting to guard Jimmy, Milwaukee would lose in 5 games. But now under Doc Rivers, that has been one thing that has changed, as all throughout the game, whenever Giannis was matched up on any of the Pistons players, he made life hell for them, even picking up huge stops on Cunningham down the stretch of the game. Then to start the 3rd, the Bucks lacked energy, as they saw the margin go out to 18 points early in the 3rd. But after a nasty flagrant foul on Stewart, where he grabbed the jersey of Giannis and threw him to the ground, the Bucks bounced back, making high energy plays to finish the game. But we'll dive deeper into what the supporting cast did to help Milwaukee win this game in a moment. But Giannis was definitely the main factor, now backing down Jalen Duran for another floater. Even when Duran was on the floor, Giannis was giving him the work too. His overall touch around the basket has certainly felt much better this season, as here he pulls up on a 16-footer and cashes it in. Giannis has made a career on finding driving lanes to the basket, and here Duran anticipates the screen of PC, but jumps the wrong way, completely losing Giannis, who gets right to the cup. This play was absolutely incredible, as 10 times out of 10 this is a turnover, but somehow Giannis is able to stay with the play, getting the ball back for a throwdown. But what has been so pretty about his game so far this season is how he's been mixing it up on opposing defenses. Here making another mid-range jumper. Then in the final seconds of the fourth, Giannis first uses his gravity to find the open Prince, who ties the game with a massive three. But in the game's closing moments, an incredibly controversial moment nearly ended this game too early. As here, Giannis contests an alley-oop play for Holland, and it's called a foul. In real time, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what happened, but on replay, it looked really clean. But even though the referees reviewed the play themselves, somehow they come to the conclusion that it's still a foul. But then we were treated to the greatest ball don't lie moment in the history of the league, as the 19-year-old Ron Holland stepped up to the free throw line and missed both, as we got overtime after all. Then in overtime, Giannis continued to make the plays that got them here in the first place, now making another midi to start the overtime. It was in that overtime period where Milwaukee went on an insane 8-0 run, clearly fired up after that terrible call, as here, Giannis makes the same kind of block he made in the 2021 finals, sending Duran packing. But the play wasn't done there, as he now takes the ball down the floor, hitting the trailing Brook Lopez, who's good enough to cash in on a 28-foot bomb. But just for good measure, Giannis, as if to say to Brook, whatever you can do, I can do better, connects on a triple of his own, putting the icing on a 59-point cake, as the Bucks pick up their first consecutive wins of the season. But despite a monstrous effort from Giannis, putting up 59 points while scoring 22 out of the team's first 24 points, Giannis wasn't the only reason Milwaukee won this game. Brook Lopez was sensational for the Bucks on both sides of the ball, finishing the game with 29 points, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, and 5 blocks on 5 of 8 shooting from deep. In the game, Brook gave the team everything, making 5 big-time triples, but it was actually the defense that completely changed the game. Because of Brook being reliant on the drop coverage, he tends to rely on the point of attack defender to put the offensive player in the right spots where he can contest their shots. And in this game, there was no Damian Lillard, so that was working much better than usual. Here, the Bucks defense makes it tough for the Pistons to even get a pass off down low, and when the ball happens to fall to Stewart, Brook comes from behind for the rejection. Now with Duran trying to set up the dribble handoff for Holland, Lopez is able to get the back tap, forcing a turnover. Here, Brook is able to put himself in the exact position he needs to be in, here coming up with a deflection on the Cunningham pass. Whenever Cade was getting to the paint, he was having no luck trying to finish over Lopez, as here his layup gets stuffed. And after that, you would have thought he had learned, but apparently not, as later in the game he tries to dunk on Lopez and gets brutally sent back. Here Marcus Sasser tries to navigate his way through the defense, but is unable to get past Lopez where he's stuffed. Anytime the Pistons tried to use Duran as a playmaker, it didn't work, as here Lopez and Giannis both swarm Jalen Duran, who's unable to get the ball back to Beasley, as Lopez comes up with another steal. Then with Cade Cunningham trying to go into leadership takeover mode, Brook was not having any of it, blocking him again. When Milwaukee's perimeter defenders are able to funnel guys to the spots where Brook's able to disrupt them, their defense looks great, but that's just it. When Damian Lillard returns to the lineup, they're not going to have nearly as good of a defensive team, as Brook is forced into trying to stay in front of guys when Dame gets blown on by. But because of how good Gary Trent Jr. played in the game, Milwaukee have a chance to actually maintain this elite defense, even when Dame comes back. In the game, Gary Trent Jr. completely changed the momentum in the second half, making threes and forcing the Pistons into turnovers. This was great to see from the Bucks, as on the season he was shooting a measly 21% from 3 from a guy who's usually right around 40% on high volume. It's crucial that Trent Jr. finds his shot and makes himself a reliable defender for this Bucks team, as he's got the potential to be the best two-guard Giannis has ever played with, providing both the spacing and defense the team needs. In my previous Bucks video, which was in the midst of their losing streak, I talked about why the return of Middleton could completely change the outlook for this team, and to put a long story short, it's because of the lineups they're going to be able to run when Middleton returns. At the moment, the combination of Giannis and Bobby Portis has not worked out, as the pair have a net rating of minus 16.2 points, and then when you look at the best two-man combination on the Bucks roster, it's Giannis and Brook. This tells you so much about why Bobby Portis doesn't work well with Giannis, and the real reason behind why it isn't working out is because with Giannis more on the ball, it leaves Bobby Portis as the last line of defense, and that just doesn't sound like a good idea, and it hasn't been. To combat this, Doc Rivers wants to try out a Giannis at the 5 lineup, which would see Milwaukee playing small ball. This would keep Giannis and Bobby split up more often, while unlocking some interesting lineup concepts that could challenge opposing defenses. The lineup I think the Bucks would go to when Middleton returns is Ryan Rollins at the 1, Gary Trent at the 2, Taurean Prince at the 3, Khris Middleton at the 4, and Giannis at the 5. This lineup gives you the elite 2-man combination of Middleton and Giannis, while surrounding them with 3-and-D talent. Also, if you've been unaware, Ryan Rollins has quietly been great for this Bucks team, as he's become an important part of the Bucks rotation, playing as their backup point guard. His defense was what first got him playing time, but it's been his ability to knock down shots and play with high energy that's kept him in the lineup. Unfortunately for Ryan Rollins, he suffered an injury in the game against the Raptors, but in the time he did play, he was having a great game, as he had 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists with 5 steals in just 22 minutes. When Khris Middleton returns, I believe this could be a real turning point in the season for Milwaukee, as it's going to allow them to have at least one and maybe even 2 of their top 3 best players on the floor at all times. This, along with a better defensive effort for the rest of the season, should see Milwaukee as a solid team once again. But that's just my take. Can Milwaukee return to the top of the Eastern Conference by the end of the season? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments section below.